The hinterland is an area within Griffith Park that integrates architecture within the already existing natural environment.
This project explores the relationship between human and nature. The goal is to create a space for humans and architecture to integrate themselves within already existing community with an emphasis on mobility and accessibility between all elements. And throughout this project, we will continue to question whether or not there is a boundary between architecture and nature.
From the manifesto, there are moments where we explore the different structural and aesthetic connections between nature and architecture, architecture within nature, and nature within architecture. Here, we explore an alternative relationship where binaries such as the human and nature relationship or public and private spaces can coexist with the use of infrastructures and programs, such as pavilions, parking lots, gyms, and even farming plots that connect and support these populations and spaces. It was key for us to understand the life already existing in the park, where elements of this existing relationship create moments of connection. And these connections are what drives this project forward.
The notion of accessibility carrying for the existing community and the idea of leaving no trace has shaped a large part of our project. It is a space where members of all communities can come together and appreciate both nature and architecture, coexisting in one integrated area. And all of this requires some sort of movement and regulation between each one in order for it to all come together and work. We are looking at the space where all of this integrated, regulated, and calculated in order for accessibility to work within the occupants and components.
Through a series of organizational studies, we explore various ways in deploying a grid in order to keep a sense of order, yet keep the lightweightness when deploying the housing units. The grid is meant as a structuring device to determine which lines matter. This become organizational ideas that help us deploy sequential elements in order to help us generate the housing swarm. And using these studies, the idea of the line came to play as the connection point between both the idea and the site. Using the organizational system, we took the already existing organic paths and brought them together to form what we call the hinterline.
The hinterland ultimately acts as the connection between architecture and nature. Through the elevated path along the hinterland, there are key moments where occupants are able to directly form a connection with the surrounding landscape, integrating themselves with the existing communities. Although these moments on the hinterland are all hyperconnected, the goal of this project is to not directly transform the entire site into an urban grid, but to implicate moments where there is structure. The grid helps us organize the central pathing where more natural paths come together into an organized system of elevated pathways.
The hinterland is split into 5 different zones. Because accessibility is a big part of the hinterland, we deemed it important to place an emphasis on how both cars and people would access the different areas along the hinterland. This accessibility system includes natural hiking trails turning into more structural walking paths, as well as a big ring road, which is the main street for vehicles to go in and out of hinterland. The hinterline extend from the center to areas further out for people to experience the whole community as well as the nature aspect of the park. There are private paths that connect residents, and they work together to connect facilities, public zones, and private zones in the community. The housing units are then deployed using swarm logic, keeping the lightweightness as seen as our manifesto.
The swarm logic ultimately showcase areas where the housing is more dense versus areas where it is less densely populated. This catalog helped organize different way in which the housing units could be uh, distrib- distributed along the hinterland and how the organization system of this unit could be manipulated to fit in with surrounding nature. The hinterland is to follow the ty- typography of the Griffith Park, where organic paths remain untouched for the most part, allowing the public to come to appreciate surrounding nature through the through the hiking trail. These are just two of many key moments on the hinterland that could be found on site. Through further study of the land, it was important to carefully unpack the different paths that would be um, deployed deployed in this project to gain an understanding of scale within the old LA Zoo area, from how wide the streets would be to the different width of the hinterland. Different possibilities were explored in order to keep the surrounding landscape as it was, staying true to humans' interpretation of the existing communities.
The pavilions allow for people to walk closer and become immersed with the natural landscape, allowing for that feeling of direct connection. And because the hinterland is essentially lifted up or elevated into the air, there are moments where bridges would be used to get across from one side to the other, keeping that connectivity in the air. There are also moments of the hinterland where the path is no longer elevated, keeping that connectivity with the surrounding nature instead, allowing occupants to be directly immersed in the natural environment.
Additionally, in order to encourage community building within our project, different options for pavilion were designed as areas for the public to come together. From the outdoor dining areas to areas for people to sit and relax, there would be different options to deploy these possibilities around the hinterland. When it comes to housing, the idea that these housing cubes are floating within nature came into play. Through exploring different ways to deploy the housing, the functionality and accessibility of these housing units played a relatively big role. There are different variables that distinguish each cube, either through scale, material, and programming. This cube catalog remains extremely abstract, and the interior of each cube is completely customizable and different, allowing for a variety of choices and options.
From there on, these housing plans can be found throughout the site where there would be three different sizes of housing, the smallest being a capsule unit at the size of 20 by 20, a studio at 30 by 30, and the largest being the family unit at 40 by 40.
Immersion comes to play a big role in how the overarching theme of this project is to design an area that fully integrates architecture within the already existing natural environment. The notion that one is always immersed in the park is fundamental in eliminating the boundary between architecture and nature.
The hinterland becomes the connecting point between human and nature. Here, people can view or fully engaged in the natural landscape.
The overarching idea is to give people to opportunities to live in a community where nature is protected, integrated, and obtainable. Immersion comes both ways, where from the inside nature seems to fully surround the housing unit, while from the outside architecture seems to embrace the environment. The hinterland allows for this relationship between human and nature to be maintained and even embraced. Thank you.